How's it going today, everybody? This is Marxist Saw. I wanted to talk today, and give my thoughts on something I see in, I guess in the U.S. during this time. Is that a lot of people don't take their phone serious. A lot of revolutionaries, even, or who are on the revolutionary path, who is antagonized by capitalism, who wants to combat colonial state and capitalist state, but they don't take their phone serious, and they find reasons to not use their phone. And so I wanted to do a video that was about why revolutionaries should use their phone. First and foremost, you have a phone. That's the reason why. if there's any reason, you have a phone, so you should use your phone to take the colonial state to war. But we're going to get into some more reasons why. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use some Lenin, and how the Bolsheviks, or how the proletariat in what was within the Tsar's empire overthrew the Tsar empire, overthrew Tsarism. Because there's different questions about the phone that I see, and different reasons why people don't. And so I'm not saying those aren't first what appear to be valid concerns, but I'm going to go into them, because I encounter them, and so I want to make something that helps revolutionaries center themselves in understanding the importance of a phone. We're going to go to the very beginning with what he wrote in prison in 1895, 1896, which was the draft and explanation of a program for the Social Democratic Party. And then we're also going to use his 1920 book, Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder. The chapter is an essential condition of the Bolshevik success. And it seems to be something consistent here when he, talks about what the struggle was. From the time it was, that the Bolsheviks hadn't been formed yet, all the way until, the Soviet Union is being formed. This is, so we're going to go to B1 here. The Russian Social Democratic Party declares that its aim is to assist the struggle of the Russian working class by developing the class consciousness of the workers, by promoting their organization, and by indicating the aims and objects of the struggle. So that's B1 of the draft program in 1896. Now let's go to an essential condition of the Bolshevik success from his book Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder that he wrote in 1920. He says here at the very beginning of this chapter, in a summary, he says, the experience of the victorious dictatorship of the proletariat in Russia has clearly shown, even to those who are incapable of thinking, or have had no occasion to give thought to the matter, that absolute centralization and rigorous discipline of the proletariat are an essential condition of victory over the bourgeoisie. He says that in the beginning of the chapter. He goes into that more. But so he says down here, the first questions to arise are, how is the discipline of the proletariat's revolutionary party maintained? How is it tested? How is it reinforced? He gives, once again, three reasons, and we're going to see the similarities between these. It says, first, by the class consciousness of the proletarian vanguard, and by its devotion to the revolution, by its tenacity, self-sacrifice, and heroism. So that sounds a lot like much more details about the very earliest objective, which was developing the class consciousness of the workers. So the second one he says here is, second, by its ability to link up, maintain the closest contact, and, if you wish, merge in certain measure with the broadest masses of the working people, primarily with the proletariat, but also with the non-proletarian masses of working people. So, you go back and you can see in the draft program of 1896, he says by promoting their organization. It's kind of a bigger, detailed version of that. Now let's look at this last one here. In the draft program, he says, and by indicating the aims and object of the struggle. And then, so the third one here in, an essential condition of the Bolshevik success in 1920, he says, third, by the correctness of the political leadership exercised by this vanguard, by the correctness of its political strategy and tactics, provided the broad masses have seen from their own experience that they are correct. So we're going to take these and we're going to combine them all together and do these in the three different sections, So let's go ahead and let's get started into these three, different. Okay, so this first section, the two, and it says developing the class consciousness of the proletarian vanguard and its devotion to the revolution by its tenacity, self-sacrifice, and heroism. I'm going to start this off with referencing another writing. If you read Marx and Lenin and you read political science, I recommend that you also read war science, because war science can kind of come down to the most basic parts of political science. War is just politics by different means, right? So they're really the same thing. I mean, they're really the exact same. It's just politics is the diplomatic version of war, and war is the undiplomatic version of politics, So we're gonna take it all the way back to 500 BC. We're going to read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, chapter 3, Attack by Stratagem. So he says, 1, Sun Tzu says, in the practical art of war, the best thing of all is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. To shatter and destroy it is not so good. So, too, it is better to recapture an army entire than to destroy it. To capture a regiment, a detachment, or a company entire than to destroy them. Hence, to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Thus, the highest form of generalship is to balk the enemy's plans. The next best is to prevent the junction of the enemy's forces. The next in order is to attack the enemy's army in the field, and the worst policy of all is to besiege walled cities. Now, what are, walled cities? For one, they're walled, but that's not the only thing that makes them difficult. It's also the fact that they're cities. That's where a lot of people are. It's where a lot of the economy is, right? It's where a lot of development is. So you don't. These are not the places you want to wage war on. You don't want to attack these places because they're people's homes, and you will antagonize people against you. The U.S. has a history of ending up having to attack cities like Fallujah, and it's gonna antagonize everybody there. I mean, obviously the Iraq War would antagonize everybody against the United States, as it still does. It antagonizes the whole world against the U.S. corporate state, but it means that you failed as you failed your diplomatic objective as an army, which invading Iraq period is not diplomatic at all. The rule is not to besiege walled cities, if it can possibly be avoided. The preparation of mantlets, movable shelters, and various implements of war will take up 3 whole months, and the piling up of mounds over against the walls will take 3 months more. It says the general, unable to control his irritation, will launch his men to the assault like swarming ants, with the result that 1/3 of his men are slain, while the town still remains untaken. Such are the disastrous effects of a siege. Therefore, the skillful leader subdues the enemy's troops without any fighting. He captures their cities without laying siege to them. He overthrows their kingdom without lengthy operations in the field. With his forces intact, he will dispute the mastery of the empire. And thus, without losing a man, his triumph will be complete. This is the method of attacking by stratagem. So this is the important part to see here. With his forces intact, he will dispute the mastery of the empire. Or why is that the best thing a general can do? Even in The Art of War, this is about war. He's talking about not going to war. He's talking about avoiding it. Because when you attack and you fight, you spin your economy up. Not only do you antagonize the people in a city, you spin your economy up trying to do that. So this is an important thing to understand about Marxist-Leninism, is that within the city, that's where the proletariat is. The proletariat lives where the factories are, because they have to work in the factory. And the factory is the most productive part of the economy. It produces faster than any other sector, whether it be commercial sector or agricultural sector. It produces and therefore develops these things. It develops the the professional sector, because now there's technology that you could use to commercial your services as, or there's now irrigation systems and tractors, and because of the proletariat, that's what the proletariat does. This is why the bourgeois is the going to be within capitalist state the inevitable dictator over society, because they're the ones that legally own all the production, and so that's who the state has to answer to, because the state has to answer to the production process, or because that's what continues society and develops society. So it's important to see here that that this is why you elevate the consciousness of the working masses every chance you get. You are always in a war. If you are in class war, you don't Using the phone is practical. It's a very practical thing to use. You can stay in your house. If you have a phone already, you can just sit there and use it way more than just driving around and talking to everybody, right? And you have to remember that there is consciousness on the other end of the phone. When you start commenting on somebody's, post or whatever, everybody, there's all these different, consciousness that is viewing what you post. So elevating that consciousness is what you have to do. There's a reason why the corporate state is constantly agitating the masses too, right? They're sponsoring all the media. They lobby all the government, but then and that gives them their hard wall, but they also have a kind of a milquetoast diplomatic effort in what they sponsor, because they have to keep the mastery of the empire in place. They can't have that disputed away, or they'll lose their walled cities, which is the hardest to capture, right? That's what we're out here combating. We're trying to, if you can imagine a ship out at water being the corporate sponsorship that is a monopoly over the masses' consciousness within the U.S., we have to sink that ship in the water, or it can't move forward, or it has to make a beeline for the land if it can. We have to sink it. You have to find the antagonisms that people experience. You have to understand their antagonisms, and you have to explain the scientific way that these happen. You have to give them undeniable universal truths, to where they can't deny it. They, at first they might be mad or whatever, but when you're out of sight, out of mind, and they're out of sight, out of mind, they're still living their life. And so those antagonisms are going to continue, and that's not going to leave them what you told them, because they sat there and thought about it. Now they don't have to feel like they're proving a point to you for the moment. So now when the production class, even if they're backwards, even if they're right wing or, whatever somebody, wants to call them. Now when they're out of sight and out of mind, you've disabled the monopoly over their consciousness. Because, you think about what right and left is. Right wing, left wing, these are basically popular ideals. If you notice, the right wing is always the popular ideal out in the country. The left wing is always the more popular ideal in the city. Why is this? This is because in the country, there's a lot less social interaction than in the city. And so there's a lot less cultural understanding in the country. Wherever when there's industrial development, there's inevitably going to be more social interaction, more cultural understanding than people in the country. At the end of the day, our ideals are determined by our consciousness. Your ideal is what you think is good to happen. What's not ideal is what's bad. Good and bad. That's what idealism is. This could be determined by, what you are allowed to understand your whole life, and your consciousness is determined by your material conditions. So with this being said, we live in an era where there is a connecting, communicative force. We have information like we never could before. You think about the Vietnam era and how they drafted our grandparents out to go to war and do that stuff. And it's because we didn't have the interaction that we have now, that no one was able to show videos of what was going on in Vietnam to everybody here like you could today, right? I mean, they did obviously reach the United Nations, and it's where the OPCW, those videos are why the OPCW banned chemical weapons in wars. But the average, the proletariat in the United States wouldn't have been able to see that. We have this advantage now. Lenin didn't have that. He didn't have that, and he had to write everything out, type everything out, distribute his pamphlets and allow people to communicate among themselves. Giving the production class the consciousness of what is happening around them, of what's going on. If they can't see what they're fighting, they won't know what they're doing. So even if you're not in an organization, by doing this, you are helping any revolutionary movement that might be going on now or in the future. You are setting the soil to where we're already all on the same page. There's not this whole... you can show them that production is what continues society and not government. And, even the right wing would be like, well, yeah, it's true, working hard, not big government, And you say, so a government can only answer to who it gives ownership over production to. So you united with them and then you forwarded their consciousness that way. I mean, that's you could do different versions of that to show people these antagonisms, to show them this and that. What's unacceptable is what we see oftentimes in Western culture. We're very impatient. But this also comes from kind of being ignorant ourselves, is when we start being insulting. Well, what keeps somebody from being ultra left, right, is that when they realize that, yeah, they're backwards people, yeah, they're ignorant people, yeah, they're in every version of these things, they've been intentionally kept that way for centuries by this colonial state. So if you want the masses to stop being ignorant, You have to shut the colonial state up. You have to shut them up from sponsoring all the information, from suppressing the consciousness of the people. It's like as if you had a leak, right? Let's say you had a leak in your house and water is going everywhere. You're like, oh no. The first thing you go do is you get a mop and you just start mopping. Meanwhile, the leak's still going. That it's good that you're mopping things. And, maybe if you got something really important you want to protect, personally, you could go mop that up first. And then, but really your best bet is to go shut the water off immediately. Go figure out, where's the water coming? Is it from the hot water heater where shut it off, because that leak is going to keep leaking. You have to actually fix the leak. Well, this is what the 250 years of the U.S. colonial state existing is. I mean, it's accumulated over and over and over again. Of course, there's going to be cultural ignorance. They wouldn't have left as 13 states if the people in those 13 states had a full understanding of what was going on out in these different nations. If they had a consciousness of what the North American nations were, of how they lived. They were constantly coming back and saying, yeah, they live like they live, they're uncivilized. We have to civilize them. This is what we're seeing today. I mean, you can see this today with the way that the U.S. media, the corporate media, will talk about China and North Korea, and they just say these ridiculous, dehumanizing things. You would think that everybody in these countries were just cattle being herded around, and that they didn't have any inalienable self-determination as people. The way they're constantly just smearing it is not ideal. Don't even worry about what's going on over there. It's not ideal. Or if they can, they say, well, look how oppressed these people are. Wouldn't it be ideal if we could go free them? It's a constant good and bad. It's constant idealism. This is what you're elevating. You're trying to sink the corporate state from its psyop. And the only way we could do this is to create a revolutionary psyop of our own, and everyone can do that right now. Everyone could go elevate the political consciousness of people. Even if you're in your room, you can get on social media and do that. This one people tend to not have so much trouble doing. Where they do need help is not just going straight to insults with people and not calling people ugly in their profile picture because they're a Trump supporter. In reality, you didn't hear Trump say things like say that Hillary Clinton killed millions of people to a big crowd of people. I've never seen a politician do that. Shut down this like George Bush bureaucrat, and by saying, do you apologize for you saying that he lied to go to the Iraq War? And he goes, well, as far as the Iraq War goes, I think it was the worst thing our country's ever done. You didn't hear him do that because that's what his supporters were seeing. You didn't see that necessarily. A lot of people didn't. That's something to unite behind there. And yeah, they're not perfect. Yeah, they're this and they're that, and but is your other option to just sit there and be still and not even utilize that? Next election, these might be the people that start getting, if there's another Republican, nobody elevated their political consciousness this whole time that Biden's been elected and doing awful as a president, economically, and everyone's feeling it. Now would be the time that somebody elevate the political consciousness of those Trump supporters. But if they come back, the Republicans come back and they get them all congregated together behind somebody like Trump, what happens when it gets worse? If it gets worse than what you were so scared of Trump, you could sit here and find those things that they supported about Trump, unite with them there, forward with them how it works, and shift their frustration from just the left back onto the corporate state. That's what you have to do, because when they're when they're out of sight and out of mind, they're still here in our economy. They're still around doing stuff. They're still actively doing that. You have to connect with them. You can't take your hand off of them. You have to be there with them and keeping an eye, because when they come back, they may come back as something that you weren't seeing, that you weren't paying attention to. Then things can get worse. And then, you being so mean to the Trump supporters is just to, be smarter than them and be, more left-wing than them and just a better person than them. What good does that do now? When we allowed them to be antagonized over and over and over again, and then Fox News kept sitting there telling them, oh, this is the left's wing's fault. This is the left. These are communists. These are all these people, the Democrats are communists. Everything the Democrats do is what communists do. And then say all these lies about China, say all these lies about, now they're lying about Russia a lot more than they used to. That's the actual process itself. If that seems hard to you, if it seems hard to just get on there and have a diplomatic conversation, it's so much easier to calmly and respectfully discuss things with them that they may not see just yet. Find where they get their feedback. Know where they're at because they're here in your community. They're here around you. And for if any moment the way that when the media turns it up and say makes everybody start wearing blue and yellow stuff on their profile when they didn't have any idea what Ukraine was and a month ago. What happens when they do that with the Trump supporters, next election when it's somebody else, when it's Tucker Carlson who's been, having a monopoly on their consciousness this entire time. And he's leading them to do all kinds of stuff that, you could point to them how United We Dream said that Joe Biden deported, over 1.2 million people in 9 months. Trump deported something like 1 million in his entire presidency. How come nobody's letting the Trump supporters know that? You could show to them how the USDA, according to the USDA, 50% of our agriculture workers are undocumented. So now even if they're not really, conscious of the migrant struggle, now they see something that affects them. Show them that 50% of the farm workers are undocumented and this government keeps deporting them. Now they're thinking, well, there goes the food. Even if they're in it for selfish reasons, there's more of a consciousness there than, oh, here comes the migrants. They're coming here and not working, which we know is, we're talking about backwards right-wing people, right? Is that going to hurt anybody if they know that? No, it's going to stay in their mind later. Now they can't be exploited so easily. It's just that much harder for the corporate state to manipulate their consciousness. And this is what the corporate state psyop is it's a manipulation of ideals because it's a manipulation of consciousness. A revolutionary psyop provides undeniable universal truth of political science, of the way that the corporate state works, and how it directly affects their antagonism, somebody's antagonisms, and universally throughout everyone's antagonisms as the production class, right? When you provide that, you sink that manipulation of ideals because they can't get past the science once they have the science in there. They can't explain the science of how Fox News and CNN and MSNBC and even the most left wing of media companies are all taking money from the same people that lobby all of our government. They're all taking money from the same defense contractors. Why do you think Trump had to talk about Iraq? Because he knew that his following was going to be ignorant people out in the country who are not so ignorant of how faulty the Iraq war was. These are people who were kept in ignorance out in the country and then told hey, we're under attack. It's Iraq. This is who's attacking us, Iraq. They all joined thinking they were being patriotic, all out of high school, threw their lives away and saw some of the worst things humanity has ever seen. Got put directly into it. A lot of them killed themselves. A lot of them, they come back. Their families didn't go, but their families saw what happened to them. Awful things. Killed a million people in Iraq. They remember that. They remember how corrupt that was. Trump had to come in and do that. He didn't do that just, he knew and he could afford to because he was already a billionaire up in New York and not somebody who only answered to billionaires in New York like the rest of Washington, D.C., He could come in and do that. Those are the sorts of things that why you have them, grab them and use them because we're in a war. We're in a war. Get your foot in the door and do it. And this is where the phone comes into handy. You can get creative with it. There's somebody on the other end there. And even when you're at home, you can sit here and follow things. And if it's not perfectly left, perfect. The lefts are going to have more cultural understanding. They're not going to be as aggressive as the rights when the corporate state wants them to be. I mean, aggressive meaning counter-revolutionary, because there's going to be left counter-revolutionaries. There's left liberalism, Not that the liberals, don't need to be educated as well. So this is what we have to do as of now because if you only have your phone, well, that's better than sitting in your room and doing nothing. And rather than wasting your time by insulting people or excluding people out of your conversations left and right, you could do that, but that's just going to prolong the war that the revolution will be. That's going to prolong the struggle. That's going to allow colonialism to continue because you find it as yourself now the immediate judge of people, of what they understand and what they know. You without ever considering, well, wait, this is the colonial state doing this and who has been doing this for 250 years. So this is why we have to use our phones to do this. This part was a little bit more about not wasting your time with your phone, right? But here's another thing, So say, well, I just don't have enough followers. I don't have enough fan base or whatever that listens to me, or I don't have enough viewers that listen to what I'm saying. If you don't have a lot of followers, I mean, you look at the people with a lot of followers that are spreading anti-imperialism or elevating the political consciousness of people in an anti-imperialist way. They're going to get hit by the corporate state affiliated social media first, right? Because that's how war works. They're going to go after the part that's building up and strengthening. They're going to want to disable that. This is where you're important. When that happens, you have to be able to carry it on. And even if you can't carry on to enough people, you're making it easier for everyone else when they go down. When they get banned or they get, their account removed, they pop up somewhere else, or eventually social media will let them back on. But you on your social media and what you have on your followers, you and everybody else who's carrying that on are important. It's just a lot more decentralized than when there's one person with a lot of viewers or when there's one account with a lot of viewers. So we need everybody doing their part like that. We need the political consciousness of the production class raised and agitated. Agitated about, their own antagonisms, understanding how they worked, educated about how they work. Because this is the climate that makes revolution possible. This strengthens their own heroism. It gives them the confidence, the education gives them the confidence that they can do it. They can actually do it. That's what we're also trying to let them know, is that the state is not infinite. And our revolutionaries need to understand that the state is not infinite. And that's what we're going to talk about in this next section, about organizing and using the phone to organize. Okay. Well, thank you all for tuning in. This is the very first section of why revolutionaries should use their phone. We'll get into the next one. Some say, well, I don't have enough followers. I don't have a lot of followers either. But hey, nevertheless, you are hearing me, right? So that's what it's all about. If y'all want to hit me up, with that being said, Facebook, Twitter, all those are Marxist Saw. I'm on TikTok sometimes and YouTube. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are my main ones I get on. I do have a Tumblr, and which I get on the very least, and then TikTok I get on maybe second least, and then I do what's it called? Medium, yeah. So hit me up there. Reach out to me, and y'all have a great day. And Dadagoy.